Hello friends, fans, and dairy products of all ages. This is Cheese of Ages here, and it's another episode of Taking5, a series in which I take shots at Taking20's take on why he's taking his ball and going home to 5th edition, leaving Pathfinder 2nd edition behind. And yes, I did in fact use the words take or taking 5 times in that particular intro as a terrible joke, because something has to be as terrible as his example battle, trying to argue the point of illusion of choice in combat, but I'm not going to go into that. Look at the previous video and acknowledge that I covered most of the points there, aside from the fact that his example fails on a scientific level as well, because he's not even having the same battle on both sides. A white in 2nd edition is not the same scale of encounter as a white in 5e. They have different ability sets, different scale and defenses in ratio to the attack bonuses they're going up against. There are different challenge ratings respective to level 5. So lots of his... it just fails on an experiment standpoint. That's not proper scientific methodology. He should have just put generic enemies scaled to the appropriate size in that spot, instead of throwing 2 drastically different encounter power enemies at 2 different parties, one of which requires he put the ability to ignore one of their defenses on one of the characters, when he could have just put a generic enemy in that slot. Now, we're not going to be talking about that, and we're going to hold off and talking about his poorly demonstrated talk about rotations of set actions and doing the same thing in combat all the time for another video, because since he failed to actually argue his point competently, shots fired, we're going to do it for him in a future video. We're also not going to talk about the list of points that he didn't elaborate on very much in his original video, and then in his second video mocked people for not talking about, even though in the previous video he didn't talk about them and said he wasn't talking about them. That's a different video, mocking him for not talking about them, and how several of those points can't be counter-argued against because he didn't even make the point to enough depth to counter-argue them. No, we're talking about one of his points that like his math about the difference between a damage of a melee and a ranged attack in his sample battle is deceptive. And that's his talking about attacks of opportunity. So before we get into the mechanical crunch of the 2 abilities, let's just go out front, point blank. If he doesn't like this style of strategy that the 2 different situations create, that's fine. That's within his right. Not everything having attack of opportunity creates different strategic scenarios. It does not remove strategy from the combat. If everything can move freely because your group does not have a person with attack of opportunity yet, then you have to position differently to accommodate for that. If enemies can't lock you down, you behave differently from that. The danger to just going off and bypassing the enemy front line comes from the threat of the enemy and needing to maintain formation, not necessarily because you can't get past them because they'll attack you. There's different strategical elements presented by the lack of attack of opportunity on everything. And the system is scaled and balanced around their monster difficulty of not everything having that. The game is balanced around not everything having that. And by that extension, let's talk about the difference between the 2 abilities. Pathfinder 2nd edition attack of opportunity is a vastly stronger ability than it is in 5th edition. Let's break it down. We're going to go straight to the fighter's version. Some other classes get variations that are slightly weaker or more limited, but several classes that don't start with attack of opportunity get the ability to gain it as a class feat later at like 6th level. And everyone with any interest in it can take a dedication feat at 2nd level to get into fighter, though that's a dead feat for some martially inclined classes. There's balance reasons why it makes it that not a big deal, and it still gives a skill training. And then at 4th level they take another feat to gain attack of opportunity of the fighter scale. So it's accessible within 2 feats to everybody, and that's not even an immense cost if you go with for your archetype rules, which are a pretty common variant rule. Not as common as feats in 5th edition, but in the same ballpark. A lot of the player base uses them. But so it's in those cases with variant rules, it's not even a huge cost, other than the fact that you're locked into taking the feats from the fighter if you want to move on to a different dedication. And even then, it's just one more feat after that. And if you're martially inclined, the fighter has good feats from stem to stern. There's pretty much not a single bad one. So you're not really out that much at all, even without free archetype. But let's compare the abilities, and we'll get back to the feat cost here. What we need to get back onto the actual statistical difference between the two attack of opportunity abilities. Pathfinder 2nd edition. It's a reaction, same as it is in 5e, and it's triggered by a creature within your reach using a manipulate action or a move action, making a ranged attack, or leaving a square during a move that it's using. Manipulate actions can include spells with hand motions, somatic components. It also includes getting weapons out and using items. What does attack of opportunity do? Essentially, you attack a foe with a melee strike, and if your attack crits and the trigger was a manipulate action, you disrupt that action. So if they try to draw a weapon, which is a manipulate, you attack of opportunity them. You crit them, they fail to draw their weapon. They wanted to cast a spell, they just straight lost it. It's really strong. And there are some attacks of opportunity that are slightly stronger than this, slightly tweaked to work in different ways, or more limited in who you can apply it to. For instance, the Ranger has a version that only applies to their hunted prey. Now, what does the opportunity attack in D&D 5e do? Well, I hadn't scrolled down the page properly, so I've got to go down to it. Essentially, you can make an opportunity attack in 5e when a hostile creature that you can see moves out of your reach. And it uses your reaction to make an attack against the provoking creature that occurs right before the creature leaves your reach. That's it. You avoid this by taking the disengage action, and you don't provoke an attack of opportunity when you teleport, something forces movement, etc., etc. The only thing without the inclusion of feats that triggers an attack of opportunity is leaving the threatened area of the person. Meaning, the enemy, can just keep running laps around the fighter and not provoke an attack of opportunity, because he's not leaving the threatened range. This also means that if you want to affect more of the battlefield with your attacks, have greater attack range, you have to sacrifice battlefield control because your threatened reach expands. So you're giving a person you've run up next to more area to move, making it also harder for you to tank for your team, because now, instead of being more than 10 feet back, they have to be more than 15 feet back from you. Because if the enemy can just go around behind you, if that ally is anywhere within what their attack range can be at any point in that circle, then they can just get to you. You need another person in there, staggered up, so on each side for that fighter's freaking attack of opportunity radius to do anything. And that's not even him locking it down, because he still can't provoke. That's just the other two people. And so that means if the bigger the creature is, the more reach they have, the even harder it is for the fighter to lock them down. So if he has reach and the thing you're fighting has reach, God, you have to be a mile away from the fighter. Oh, and here we call back to that point where I say everyone in the game could technically grab attack of opportunity, on the player side at least, with 2 feats. Well, remember all of those things that the Pathfinder 2nd edition attack of opportunity can get? You can get attack of opportunity with 2 feats by level 4. By level 4, you have to give up an ability boost. And in 5e, you have to be able to get even a fraction of the power of the 2e attack of opportunity. Insert invincible meme here about look what they need to mimic even a fraction of our power. You need to give up an ability score boost at 4th level to take a feat instead, if your table runs the very common optional rule that pretty much everyone uses, to take a feat to disrupt spellcasting. There's nothing, no feat that you can take to get the ability to keep them from just running around you. It doesn't exist. There's a combat style in Unearthed Arcana, which means it's playtest material and not published content, that is a tunnel fighter that enables you to enter a specific stance to make attack of opportunity do that. And then technically, I think there's a feat somewhere to get a combat style, so technically you can do that. That's just one aspect of what the Pathfinder 2nd edition attack of opportunity gets you. So you still need 2 feats to disrupt spellcasting, disrupt move actions, to another feat to freaking even... It's like 2 feats just for the spellcasting and for the movement power. Nothing breaks up ranged attacks. And you have to venture into a combat style feat there to get the combat style and enter a specific stance using some form of action to enter that. You don't have that by default anyway. So you've already got that. And then that doesn't... There's no means by which to provoke if they try and draw a weapon or manipulate. Nothing that causes the crits to keep them from drawing a weapon. Nothing. So, I ask you, in this situation in which, without feat support, you don't provoke an attack of opportunity unless you leave the threatened area of the person, so you can just move freely and attack anyone you want if they're within your reach around the person. Does anyone in 5th edition have attack of opportunity without feats either? I mean, I'm sure there's some situations in which there's the cases of which when the party's way spread out on a large battlefield, that'll come up in situations in which the enemy just doesn't finish the person they're next to and run up to you. I'm sure that's a thing. And boss fights where the person can just disengage and then get free off-turn actions to attack you regardless and be completely unimpeded and unlocked down by the ability. Does anyone in D&D 5th edition have attack of opportunity without feats? That's what I'm wondering. And in fact, taking the same number of feats, you get way more feat value in equivalent exchange because attack of opportunity does way more. It does more than 3 feats worth of stuff that 5th edition's attack of opportunity relies upon doing. There's no legitimately published, as of right now, means by which to make the opportunity attack function as it does in Pathfinder 2nd Edition as far as keeping people from running circles around you. There's no means by which to do that. Nothing. No feat does that, unless you incorporate Unearthed Arcana, which is not published content, it's playtest material. So there. That's that settled. In truth, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition and D&D 5th Edition, they have the same amount of access to attack of opportunity, unless you're trying to run away. And it's even easier to do that in 5th Edition than it is in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Because all you've got to do in 5th Edition is disengage and move. Sure, you can't attack, because that's unless you have a bonus action attack. But in Pathfinder, stepping, if you're in a corner, the only thing you can do is move 5 feet to try and get out of a threatened area. And then, once you've stepped 5 feet enough as a whole action to get out of the dangerous area, then you can take another action to widen the gap between the two of you. You can't do that in one action. Sure, you still have one action left, but it's a lot more convoluted, and you are far harder locked down in more situations. The only valid complaint to have about the difference in opportunity attacks is in the fact that most enemies don't have it. And the game is balanced around enemies not having it. That falls back to the difference in strategic play. Not enemies not having attack of opportunity doesn't remove an element of strategy. It just means the element of strategy that's there is different. Because you have to position differently. You have to do things in different ways. You have to be concerned about how much damage you'll take, because in certain situations you can't keep the guys from getting onto you. If you have a fighter, your team tactics are going to vary drastically from the party without it. And let's get into the area of monsters not having attacks of opportunity is the domain of the DM. You can give as many things as you want attack of opportunity. There's no rule against it. The game's not balanced that way, but once the players realize that more things than normal have attack of opportunity, then they'll just fall into the same patterns of responding to attack of opportunity being an option. They'll make sure to check and see if that thing has an attack of opportunity before they go sprinting across the battlefield. So yeah, reasonably short video. There's the differences between attack of opportunity and the two editions. There's the honest presentation of the difference. Now, feel free to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition or 5e however you like. I actually play both games myself. I enjoy both games. Just remember, if the fighter in 5th Edition tells you to get behind him and stay close so he can protect you, he's actually giving you terrible advice. Stand way far behind him so that the enemies can't just walk up to him, walk around him, and stab you. Be careful. The fighter has almost no ability to lock the enemy down. No matter how many feats he takes, he has no control of the battlefield. And if he takes up a reach weapon, he's just granting the enemies more mobility and restricting his control over the battlefield. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, he would have greater control because his threatened area is larger, and any square of movement through it can provoke an attack of opportunity. In 5th Edition, a reach weapon just makes the enemies go, hey, it's free real estate. So, be careful. Or just do what everyone does and homebrew all of the things that don't work in 5th Edition out. We'll go into more in-depth and maybe slightly more mean-spirited videos on a future date. But for now, I've got to roll.